Now, some prisoners in England and Wales could be released 2 months early as part of a raft of government measures to try to ease overcrowding in prisons. The Justice Secretary announced the plans in Parliament earlier today.
We will also extend the existing end of custody supervised licence measure to around 35 to 60 days. We will enable this to happen for a time-limited period and work with the police, prisons and probation leaders to make further adjustments as required. This will only be for certain low-level offenders. Where necessary, electronic monitoring will be applied to enhance public protection. Ministers will, of course, continue to keep use of this measure under review.
So let's take a closer look at what's going on. The Ministry of Justice says prisons can safely house around 79,000 prisoners at a standard of good and decent accommodation, this top bar here. But official stats, this bar here, show prisons are actually holding 8,000 more than that, 87,000 prisoners overall. So how many prisoners will be let out early? Our fact-check team asked the Ministry of Justice that question back in November when the plan was to release prisoners 18 days early. We got a reply 3 days ago saying the department does not hold any such estimate. And a senior official said last month it depends on short-term changes in each prison. So would releasing prisoners early actually solve overcrowding? Well, a big issue is remand prisoners, those being held before or during their trial or sentencing because authorities believe they're too dangerous to be in the community. Now, those numbers rocketed from 9,000 in June 2019 to 16,000 last December, a 75% increase. And that, in turn, has a lot to do with delays in the courts system, where the number of criminal cases waiting for trial in the Crown Courts has ballooned from 35,000 in 2019 to 66,000 last year. Now, these won't all be cases where the defendant is on remand, but more court backlogs mean more prisoners on remand waiting for trial and sentencing, which adds to pressure on prisons. The government says a court's backlog caused by the pandemic was exacerbated by the barristers' strike. It told us it's recruiting up to 1,000 judges and investing £220 million on modernisation and repairs. Well, I'm joined now by Alison Lowe, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime in West Yorkshire. Alison, you saw the numbers there.
Yes.
There are more prisoners than it seems there are places at the minute. Is this the only option available to the government, letting some prisoners out to 2 months early?
Absolutely not. If we had a strategy, a national strategy for reducing reoffending and rehabilitation, actually many of those people would not be in prison. We know that in remand, 20% of remand prisoners are young people. Really, should they be in prison? We know that you're 13 times more likely to be remanded and in prison if you're a looked-after child. So actually, many of those people do not need to be in prison. We need a proper strategy that's going to deal with the causes of the criminalisation of young people and going to hopefully lead to better outcomes for all of us in our communities.
Is that what you mean? You work for a Labour mayor here in West Yorkshire. Is that what you would expect a Labour government to do differently then? Because there's still going to be the same number of prison places, you know, give or take a few thousand more coming down the line if Labour win the election.
I'm hoping that we'll have a localised justice system that's underpinned by our mayoral combined authority. We'll have pooled criminal justice budgets and we'll be able to make decisions together using incentivisation to get all of us to work together properly, not to send people to prison, but to get them into training, education, accommodation. None of that is part of the government's plan. They just want to build more prisons.
Now, Labour in the Commons today was saying this was the most drastic form of early prisoner release ever in this country. You know, it might make people quite frightened to hear words like that. I mean, what about the victims? You know, would they expect prisoners coming out 2 months early? To, you know, what's the effect? What's the implication?
Well, currently, if you're a victim of crime, there's very little chance that you're going to get justice. So the proportion of crimes that have led to charges have dropped two-thirds, nearly two-thirds since 2015. So you don't get justice now. And when you've got people in prison, sometimes for what are called low-level offences, they're meeting people who have been in there for a long time. They're being traumatised by the state of the prison system. They come out into our communities and they're then going to do worse than they did before they went in. So let's prevent them going in, do the great work with them in the community that we know we can do, and make sure that the prisons are not then full, because currently the situation is risible.
And the government says these are for low-level offenders. But, I mean, it exists already, doesn't it, this scheme?
Yeah. So currently, people can come out of prison 18 days early. And again, this is because the government hasn't got a strategy, hasn't got a plan for how they're going to free up prison places. But I say, get a strategy, and then you won't have to build 20,000 more prison places.
Exactly. They say
or release people early.
They say their strategy is building those places, I suppose. But Alison, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us.